The stars had always called to humanity. For 300 years they had answered that call, spreading across the solar system and beyond. By the year 2347, Earth was no longer a single world, but the heart of a growing civilization. Colonies dotted the moons of Jupiter. Mining stations harvested the rings of Saturn. And on distant worlds, children were born who had never seen the blue skies of the home planet. But Earth was not alone in the universe. Far from it. The Galactic Dominion had ruled the stars for 10,000 years. 800 star systems bowed to their masters. The Veltarian ancient species who believed they were chosen to guide all life in the galaxy. They were tall, pale beings, with eyes like black glass, and voices that seemed to echo from somewhere deep and cold. They did not conquer through war alone. They conquered through patience, through manipulation, through the slow crushing of hope. When the Dominion first made contact with humanity, they offered friendship. They offered technology. They offered a place among the stars. All Earth had to do was kneel. Earth refused. For 50 years, the Dominion watched and waited. They sent diplomats who smiled with too many teeth. They offered trade agreements that would have made humanity dependent on alien goods. They whispered promises to ambitious politicians and planted seeds of doubt in fearful hearts. And then, one cold morning in March, Commander Taiho found the message. Taiho was 34 years old. A pilot of the orbital defense fleet stationed above the Pacific. He had spent 12 years in space, guarding the planet he loved from threats that had never come. His crew called him steady. His commanders called him reliable. He had never expected to be the one who discovered that everything was about to change. The message came through on a frequency that should not have existed. It was hidden inside routine traffic data, buried so deep that only a lucky glitch in his scanner brought it to light. At first, Taiho thought it was garbage random noise from some distant pulsar. But when he ran it through the translation software, the words made his blood turn cold. Submit or be erased. The phrase repeated in every human language: English, Korean, Mandarin, Spanish, Arabic, hundreds of tongues, all saying the same thing. And attached to the message were coordinates, dozens of them, scattered across Earth's territory. Dates stretched back months, even years. Someone had been watching. Someone had been waiting. And now, someone was done waiting. Taiho reported his discovery immediately. Within hours, he found himself standing in a secure room deep beneath Seoul, facing people whose names he had only seen in news. Reports generals, intelligence, directors, scientists, and one woman who studied. The message with eyes that missed. Nothing. Her name was Yuna. She was 29. A xenolinguist who had spent her career trying to understand how alien minds worked. She had learned 6 human languages and 3 alien ones. She had written papers that other scientists called brilliant and impossible. And she had been tracking strange patterns for months, patterns that no one else had believed were real until now. Yuna looked at Taiho's message and felt something click into place. The shipping manifests that had been altered. The satellite feeds that had glitched at strange times. The children's broadcasts that had carried hidden frequencies. It was all connected. It had always been connected. The Dominion had not been idle during those 50 years of silence. They had been working, planting agents, building networks, preparing for the day when humanity would finally be forced to choose. That day had come. Yuna and Taiho worked together through the night, tracing the coordinates in the message. Each one led to a persona, politician, a business leader, a military officer, people in positions of power, people who had been making decisions that slowly weakened Earth's defenses, delayed its expansion, kept it dependent on systems that could be easily controlled. Sleeper agents. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. The realization was terrifying. The enemy was not just out there among the stars. The enemy was here, walking the same streets, breathing the same air, pretending to be human, while working to destroy everything humanity had built. But there was something else in the message. Something that Yuna almost missed because it was hidden so carefully. A timestamp. A countdown. 90 days. In 90 days, something would happen. An invasion, an attack, an ultimatum enforced. The message did not say what. It did not need to. The meaning was clear enough: submit or be erased. Taiho stood by the window as the sun rose over Seoul. The city stretched out below him, millions of people going about their lives, unaware that their world was about to change forever. He thought about his family in Busan, his sister's children, the future they deserved. He turned to Yuna. She looked tired. She looked scared. But she also looked determined. They both knew what had to be done. Earth needed to be warned. The sleeper agents needed to be found. And humanity needed to prepare for a fight that had been coming for 50 years. The Dominion believed that humans were weak. They believed that a species so young, so divided, so fragile, could never stand against an empire that had crushed 1,000 worlds. They believed that fear would do their work for them. They were about to learn how wrong they were in the days that followed. Taiho and Yuna became the center of a storm. Intelligence agencies scrambled to verify their findings. Military commanders demanded answers. Politicians argued about what to do. Some wanted to fight. Some wanted to negotiate. Some wanted to pretend that nothing was happening and hope the problem would go away. But the countdown continued. 89 days, 88, 80-7, and somewhere in the dark between the stars, the Dominion watched. They had seen this before. The panic, the denial, the slow collapse of hope. It always ended the same way. Every species eventually knelt. They were certain that humanity would be no different. They could not have been more wrong, because deep in the hearts of those fragile, frightened, divided humans, something was waking up. Something old. Something fierce. Something that had carried them through ice ages and plagues and wars and every disaster that had ever tried to break them. It was the thing that made humans different. The thing the Dominion had never understood. It was the refusal to surrender, and it was about to change everything. The United Council met in Geneva 3 days after the message was confirmed. Leaders from every nation gathered in a room built to hold the hopes of humanity. Instead, it held their fears. Chancellor Hannah stood at the center of it all. She was 41 years old, the youngest person to ever hold her position. She had been elected on promises of unity and progress. Now, she faced a crisis that could end everything. The room was loud with arguments. Admiral Suho, commander of the Pacific Fleet, slammed his fist on the table. He was a broad man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. He demanded action. Build more ships. Train more soldiers. Meet the enemy with fire. Senator Minho spoke against him. He was smooth where Suho was rough, calm where Suho was angry. He reminded the council that the Dominion had never lost a war. Their ships could destroy cities from orbit. Their armies numbered in the billions. Fighting them was not courage. It was suicide. The council fractured along these lines. Some nations sided with Suho, others followed Minho, and in between, millions of ordinary people watched their leaders argue while the countdown continued. 75 days, Hannah listened to both sides. She did not shout. She did not argue. She simply waited until the room fell quiet, and then she spoke. Earth would not surrender. That much was certain. But Earth also could not win a straight fight. They needed information. They needed allies. They needed to understand their enemy before they could defeat them. She turned to Taiho. In Yuna, they had proven themselves capable. They had uncovered the conspiracy when no one else had seen it. Now she needed them to do something harder. Crescent Harbor was a space station at the edge of known space. It was neutral territory, a place where species from across the galaxy came to trade and talk and spy on each other. The Dominion had agents there. So did their enemies. If there was any information to be found, Crescent Harbor was the place to find it. Taiho would go as a pilot delivering supplies. Yuna would go as a diplomatic observer. Their real mission was to learn everything they could about the Dominion's plans and to find anyone who might be willing to help. The journey to Crescent Harbor took 2 weeks. Their ship was small and fast, designed to avoid attention. Taiho flew while Yuna studied intercepted communications. Looking for patterns in the Dominion's movements, she found them. The Dominion was massing ships near the edge of human space. Not a full invasion fleet, not yet, but enough to crush any resistance if Earth tried to fight back too soon. They were testing humanity, watching to see what they would do, waiting for the fear to do its work. Crescent Harbor was unlike anything Tai-Ho had ever seen. The station was massive, a city floating in the void. Ships from 100 worlds docked at its ports. Species of every shape and size walked its corridors, some tall and graceful, others small and quick. Still others so strange that Tai-Ho could not tell where their bodies ended and their machines began, and everywhere. The presence of the Dominion. Veltari officials moved through the crowds like sharks through water. Their servants followed behind, species that had been conquered so long ago that they had forgotten what freedom meant. Yuna made contact with the underground quickly. In a place like Crescent Harbor, secrets were the most valuable currency. She traded information for information, hints for hints, till finally she found what they were looking for. Her name was Nari. She was a smuggler, a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. She had been running goods across Dominion space for 20 years, dodging patrols and bribing officials. She hated the Veltari with every fiber of her being. She was also human, born on Earth, raised on the colonies, lost to the stars when she was barely 18. She had seen things that most humans could not imagine: worlds burned to ash, species reduced to slavery, hope crushed so completely that even the memory of freedom faded away. But she had also seen something else: resistance, small, scattered, hidden in the shadows, but real. Species that still remembered what they had lost. People who still dreamed of fighting back. Nari told them about the Ilmari. The Ilmari had been a proud species once. Warriors and poets, builders and dreamers. 50 years ago, they had done what no one else had dared. They had told the Dominion no. The war lasted 30 years. The Ilmari fought with everything they had. They won battles that should have been impossible. They held lines that should have broken. They made the Dominion bleed in ways that had not happened in centuries. But in the end, it was not enough. The Dominion brought more ships, more soldiers, more weapons. They burned Ilmara, the Ilmari homeworld, till nothing remained but ash and memory. Almost nothing. Nari leaned close, her voice dropping to a whisper. One Ilmari had survived. One warrior who had escaped the final destruction and disappeared into the darkness between the stars. For 50 years he had hidden himself away, waiting for death or something better. He was somewhere in human space. Nari did not know exactly where, but she knew people who might. Tai-Ho and Yuna exchanged a look. This was more than they had hoped for. An Ilmari warrior who had fought the Dominion and survived. Someone who knew their tactics. Someone who knew their weaknesses. If such weaknesses existed, 60 days remained. The countdown continued. But for the first time since the message had been found, Tai-Ho felt something other than fear. He felt hope. The journey back to Earth was tense. Nari came with them, her ship docked inside theirs. She did not trust easily, but she trusted even less in the Dominion's mercy. If humanity was going to fight, she wanted to be part of it. Meanwhile, on Earth, the situation was getting worse. Senator Minho's faction had grown stronger. They whispered that Chancellor Hannah was leading them to destruction. They promised that surrender would bring peace. They painted pictures of a future where humanity lived comfortably under Dominion protection. Some people believed them. Fear was a powerful weapon, and the Dominion had been using it for 10,000 years, but others remembered who they were. Workers and farmers and teachers and soldiers. Ordinary people who had built extraordinary things. They looked at the stars and refused to believe. Their story ended here. The battle for Earth's soul had begun, and it was only getting started. Europa was a frozen world. Ice stretched from horizon to horizon, broken only by the domes of human settlements that dotted its surface. Beneath the ice lay an ocean, dark and ancient. But the colonists who lived there rarely thought about it. They were too busy surviving. New Busan was one of the largest settlements. 50,000 people lived under its protective domes, mining ice and minerals, maintaining the systems that kept them alive. It was a hard life, far from Earth and its comforts. The people who chose to live there were tough, practical, and suspicious of strangers. Teho. Yuna and Nari arrived quietly. Their ship landed at a private dock, away from the main port. They did not want attention. They were looking for a ghost. Nari's contacts had pointed them here. The last Ilmari survivor had been seen on Europa years ago, living under a false name, working a simple job. If he was still alive, this was where they would find him. They searched for 3 days. They asked careful questions in workers' bars and trading posts. They followed rumors that led nowhere. And then, on the 4th day, Yuna found him. He was working in a repair shop on the edge of the settlement. A small place, cluttered with broken machines and spare parts. The owner was a quiet man with gray hair and hands that knew their way around tools. His name, according to the records, was Wujin, but Yuna saw through the disguise. The way he moved. The way he watched everyone who entered. The scars on his arms that no human injury could explain. This was not a mechanic. This was a warrior wearing the mask of an ordinary man. His real name was Torek. He was the last son of Ilmara. 2 REK did not welcome them. He looked at them with eyes that had seen too much death, and he told them to leave. He wanted nothing to do with their war. He had fought his war. He had lost. Everyone he loved was gone. All that remained was waiting for the end. Yuna did not leave. She sat down across from him and began to talk. She talked about Earth. She talked about the message, the countdown, the sleeper agents. She talked about the billions of people who had never done anything wrong except exist in a galaxy ruled by monsters. She talked about hope to REK listened. He did not want to. But something in her voice reached through the walls he had built around himself. She reminded him of people he had known long ago. People who had believed that fighting mattered even when winning was impossible. Finally, he spoke. He told them about the war. 30 years of blood and fire. Victories that had seemed like miracles. Defeats that had crushed entire worlds. He told them about friends who had died in his arms and enemies who had haunted his dreams. And he told them about the Nexus. Mind. The Dominion's power did not come from ships or soldiers. It came from control. Every Veltari warship, every command center, every soldier in the field was connected to a single network, a living consciousness that coordinated their movements with perfect efficiency. The Nexus mind saw everything, knew everything, controlled everything. Without it, the Dominion was just a collection of scattered forces. Without it, their fleets would drift without orders. Without it, their empire would collapse into chaos. The Elmari had discovered this secret near the end of their war. They had tried to reach the Nexus mind, tried to destroy it, but they had run out of time. The Dominion had burned their world before they could finish what they started. Torek had kept their research. Hidden in encrypted files, buried in databases that no one would think to search. He had kept it because throwing it away felt like throwing away everyone who had died. He had kept it because some part of him still hoped that someday someone would finish what his people had begun. Yuna's eyes lit up. This was what they needed. A weakness. A target. A chance, but Torek warned them. The Nexus mind was located in the heart of Veltari space, surrounded by defenses that could destroy fleets. Reaching it would require a weapon that did not exist. A plan that had never been tried, and a willingness to sacrifice everything for a victory that might never come. Yuna did not hesitate. She would build the weapon. She would make the plan. And if sacrifice was required, she would pay that price. Taiho watched her and felt something tighten in his chest. He had known Yuna for only a few weeks, but already he understood what kind of person she was. She was the kind who would walk into fire if it meant saving others. The kind who would give everything and ask for nothing. In return, the kind who might not survive what was coming. They returned to Earth with Torek and his research. 40 days remained. The countdown continued, and then the traders made their move. Senator Minho had been planning for months. His allies were positioned throughout the government. His supporters controlled key military bases, and his masters in the Dominion had promised him power beyond anything he could imagine. The coup began at midnight. Soldiers loyal to Minho seized communication centers across the globe. His allies in the council called for an emergency vote to remove Chancellor Hannah from power. Everything was moving according to plan. Everything except Hannah herself. Captain Jiho had suspected Minho for weeks. He was the head of the Chancellor's security, a quiet man with sharp instincts and absolute loyalty. He had placed his own people in positions where they could watch the traitors. When the coup began, he was ready. The fighting was brief but bloody. Jiho's forces intercepted the assassins sent to kill Hannah. Loyal soldiers retook the communication centers. And across the planet, people rose up against the collaborators who had tried to sell them into slavery. By dawn, it was over. Minho and his allies were in custody. The evidence against them was overwhelming years of secret communications with Dominion handlers, promises of wealth and power in exchange for betrayal. Hannah addressed the planet that evening. She did not hide the truth. She told them everything: the conspiracy, the countdown, the enemy waiting among the stars. She told them that the road ahead would be hard, that some of them would not survive, that the cost of freedom was always paid in blood. But she also told them that they had a choice. They could kneel and live as slaves, or they could stand and die as free people. The response came from every corner of the globe, not in words, but in actions. Factories increased their production. Soldiers reported for duty. Scientists worked through the night. Ordinary people did extraordinary things. 30-5 days remained, and humanity was done being afraid. The shipyards of Earth had never worked so hard. Every dock, every factory, every repair station operated around the clock. Workers slept in shifts, ate at their stations, and pushed themselves beyond exhaustion. They built warships from empty frames. They armed cargo vessels with weapons never designed for them. They turned anything that could fly into something that could fight. Admiral Suho commanded the effort. He was everywhere at once, inspecting holes, approving designs, shouting at engineers who moved too slowly. He had spent 30 years preparing for a war he hoped would never come. Now that it had arrived, he intended to be ready. Taiho trained pilots. Hundreds of them, recruited from civilian transports and mining operations and colony defense forces. They were not soldiers. Most had never fired a weapon in their lives, but they learned. They learned to fly in formation. They learned to evade enemy fire. They learned that their lives meant nothing compared to the mission. The Vanguard squadron was born from this chaos. 12 pilots, handpicked by Taiho for their skill and their courage. They would lead the strike force that would carry humanity's last hope into the heart of enemy space. Meanwhile, Yuna worked with Torek on the weapon that would destroy the Nexus mind. It was called the Quantum. Resonance device, a name that meant nothing to most people, but everything to those who understood what it could do. The device would generate a pulse that would tear apart the neural connections of the Nexus. It would kill a living mind, the size of a planet. The problem was range. The pulse had to be released inside the Nexus chamber itself. There was no way to fire it from a distance. Someone would have to carry it there. Someone would have to stay and activate it. Someone would not be coming back. Yuna accepted this without hesitation. She told no one except Torek, who understood sacrifice better than anyone alive. She continued her work, continued her smiles, continued pretending that she had a future Taiho suspected. He watched her sometimes when she did not know he was looking. He saw the weight she carried. He wanted to say something, to offer help, to take the burden from her shoulders. But he did not know how. Words had never been his strength, so he did what he could. He trained harder. He pushed his pilots further. He made sure that when the time came, they would get Yuna where she needed to go. 20 days remained. The resistance was spreading. Nari's smuggler network had become a web of communication stretching across the galaxy. Messages passed from ship to ship, planet to planet, species to species. For the first time in centuries, The conquered peoples of the Dominion dared to hope. Riots broke out on factory worlds. Supply convoys disappeared. Military installations reported mysterious malfunctions. The Veltari commanders grew frustrated. Their perfect system was showing cracks. On a prison moon called Vethkar, 3,000 prisoners overwhelmed their guards and seized control. They broadcast a message that echoed through every resistance channel. They said they would rather die free than live as slaves. The Dominion responded by destroying the moon. A single warship, a single shot, 100,000 lives erased in an instant, but instead of crushing hope, it fed the fire. Across the galaxy, beings who had been silent for generations began to speak. They remembered who they had been before the Dominion came. They remembered what they had lost, and they began to fight back. 10 days remained, Chancellor. Hannah stood before the council for what might be the last time. The chamber was full. Every leader, every representative, every voice that mattered. They had come to hear her speak. She did not give them promises. She did not give them certainty. She gave them truth. The enemy was coming. Their fleet was vast beyond imagination. Their weapons could break worlds. By every calculation, by every measure, humanity should not survive the coming battle. But calculations were not everything. Measures did not account for the human heart. And history was full of moments when the impossible had become real because people refused to accept any other outcome. She spoke of their ancestors who had crossed oceans in wooden ships, of their grandparents who had rebuilt civilization from the ashes of wars, of their parents who had reached for the stars even when everyone said it could not be done. She spoke of the children who were watching, even now, the children who would inherit whatever future was built today, the children who deserved to grow up free. Her voice rang through the chamber and beyond, broadcast to every corner of human space. They will come for us. They will try to break us. And we will show them what humanity truly is. Not our ships, not our weapons, not our technology, but our spirit, our refusal to surrender, our love for each other and for the freedom that makes our lives worth living. They have never faced anything like us. And when this is over, they never will again. The fleet launched 3 days later. 1,000 ships rising from Earth orbit, from lunar docks, from stations scattered across the solar system. It was the largest force humanity had ever assembled. It was still hopelessly outnumbered, Admiral Suho commanded from the flagship. The S-Unity, Captain Ji-Ho, commanded the defense perimeter around Earth. Tai-Ho led the Vanguard squadron, their small, fast ships clustered around a single transport the ship that carried Yuna and the quantum device. Torek flew with them. He had not piloted a fighter in 50 years, but his hands remembered. His heart remembered. This was what he had been waiting for all this time. A chance to finish what his people had started. They waited at the edge of the solar system. Sensors pointed outward. Watching for the enemy that would soon arrive, 1 day remained. The countdown reached 0, and then the stars began to fill with ships. 3,000 warships emerged from hyperspace. Their hulls were black as night, their weapons glowing with cold light. At their center flew the Dominion flagship, vessel so massive it could have housed entire cities within its frame. Overlord Veth stood on its bridge. He was ancient even by Veltari standards, a being who had crushed rebellions before humanity had learned to walk upright. He looked at the human fleet and felt something close to amusement. They were brave. He would grant them that. But bravery had never stopped the Dominion before. He broadcast his final demand: immediate surrender, total submission. Any resistance would be met with complete annihilation. The human fleet held position. No response came. Veth waited. He was patient. He had all the time in the universe, and then from 1,000 human ships, a single transmission began to play. It was an old song, something from Earth's ancient past. A song about standing when others ran, about fighting when others surrendered, about dying on your feet rather than living on your knees. Veth did not understand the words, but he understood the meaning. These creatures would not kneel. He gave the order to attack. The battle of soul had begun. The void erupted in fire. Dominion weapons lit the darkness with beams of white-hot energy. Human ships scattered like leaves in a storm, dodging, weaving, trying to survive the first terrible seconds of contact. Explosions blossomed across the battlefield as vessels died in silence. Admiral Suho watched from the Unity's bridge, his jaw tight. The enemy was everything he had feared and worse. Their ships moved with perfect coordination, each vessel knowing exactly where the others would be. Each weapon firing at precisely the right moment. This was the Nexus mind at work, a single consciousness controlling thousands of ships, as if they were fingers on a single hand. But the human fleet was not finished. They could not match the Dominion in firepower or numbers, so they did something else. They broke every rule of space warfare that the Veltari had ever known. Small squadrons broke from the main formation, attacking from unexpected angles. Ships that should have retreated pressed forward, drawing enemy fire while others struck from behind. Pilots flew patterns that no sane commander would order erratic. Unpredictable, impossible to anticipate. The Dominion's perfect coordination began to falter. The Nexus mind could predict mathematical patterns, but human creativity was not mathematical. It was chaos given form. It was madness with a purpose. Captain Jiho led the defense perimeter around Earth. His ships were old, many of them converted cargo haulers with weapons bolted to their hulls. They should have been destroyed in the first volley. Instead, they held. Jiho knew every pilot by name. He had trained with them, eaten with them, listened to their fears and their hopes. Now he watched them die one by one, and he kept fighting. The line would hold. It had to hold. Behind them was everything that mattered. At the heart of the battle, Taiho and the Vanguard squadron fought to clear a path. The transport carrying Yuna and the quantum device could not be exposed to enemy fire. It was the most important ship in the fleet, and every Dominion commander knew it. Wave after wave of fighters threw themselves at the transport. Taiho's pilots met them in a dance of fire and death. Ships exploded around them. Friends vanished in bursts of light, but they kept pushing forward, closer to the hyperspace corridor that would take them to Veltari space. Torek flew at Taiho's wing. His old fighter was slower than the others, its systems outdated by decades. But his hands were steady, and his aim was true. He shot down enemy after enemy, each kill a prayer for his fallen people. Nari's ship was the first to fall. She had been running interference, drawing fire away from the transport. A Dominion cruiser caught her in a crossfire. Her last transmission was laughter-wild. Defiant laughter that echoed across the squadron's channel before cutting to static. Taiho felt something break inside him. But he could not stop. He could not mourn. Not yet. The transport reached the corridor. The hyperspace engines engaged. Reality twisted around them. Suddenly, they were launched toward the heart of enemy territory at speeds that defied comprehension. Behind them, the Battle of Seoul continued. Suho's flagship took a direct hit. The bridge erupted in flames and chaos. Officers screamed. Systems failed, but Suho remained at his post, blood running from a wound on his forehead. Shouting orders into the smoke, the Unity was dying. He knew that. But a dying ship could still fight. He ordered ramming speed. The Unity accelerated toward the nearest Dominion battleship. Weapons fire tore at its hull. Entire sections vented into space. Crew members died at their stations, never knowing if their sacrifice meant anything. The impact was visible from orbit. Two vessels, locked together in death, spinning into the void. The Dominion battleship broke apart. The Unity followed moments later. Suho died with his hand on the helm. His eyes fixed on the enemy. The transport emerged in Veltari space. They had arrived at the Nexus system, a place no enemy had ever reached. Before them hung a structure that defied description. It was not a station. It was not a planet. It was something alive, something ancient. A vast neural network grown over millennia. The Nexus mind, defenses activated immediately. Weapon platforms opened fire. Ships emerged from hidden docks. The handful of human fighters that had made it this far began to fall. Torek's ship was hit. His engines died. His weapons went dark. But his comm system still worked. He told Tai-Ho to keep going. He told Yuna that her people would remember what she did here, and then his ship drifted into the path of an incoming missile, blocking a shot that would have destroyed the transport. The old Ilmari died as he had, lived protecting others. Tai-Ho flew alone now. The transport was damaged, leaking atmosphere, barely holding together. Yuna's voice came through his helmet, calm despite everything. She had reached the insertion point. A small gap in the Nexus defenses, a maintenance port barely large enough for a human to pass through. The device was armed. She was ready. Tai-Ho wanted to say something. Wanted to tell her that he was sorry. That he wished things had been different. That in another life, maybe, they could have been more than soldiers fighting a war. But there was no time. There was never enough time. Yuna smiled at him through the video feed. Her eyes were bright, unafraid. She said she was glad to have known him, glad to have been part of this, glad that her life had meant something. Then she was gone, launching herself through the gap, into the heart of the Nexus mind. What happened next, no one would ever fully understand. The pulse from the quantum device rippled outward, tearing through neural pathways that had existed for 10,000 years. The Nexus mind screamed across every frequency, sound of pure agony that reached across the galaxy, and then silence. Across the Dominion warships stopped moving. Soldiers stood frozen, waiting for orders that never came. The great machine that had controlled everything simply stopped its soul. The Dominion fleet fell into chaos. Ships collided with each other. Weapons fired at random. Commanders who had never made an independent decision in their lives suddenly found themselves alone. Overlord. Veth watched from his bridge as his fleet disintegrated. He understood what had happened. He understood what it meant. He ordered a retreat. The first retreat in Voltari history. The surviving human ships watched as the enemy fled. No one cheered. They were too tired, too broken, too aware of everything they had lost, but they had won. 1 year later, the memorial stood on the plains outside Seoul. Names carved in black stone, thousands of them. Stretching toward the horizon, Suho, Jeho, Nari, Torik, Yuna, and so many others, whose stories would never be fully told. Commander Tai-Ho stood before it, wearing a dress uniform he had never expected to wear. Chancellor Hannah spoke to the crowd, a vast gathering of humans and aliens alike, species freed from Dominion control. People who had come to see the world that had changed the galaxy. She spoke of sacrifice, of courage, of the price that freedom demanded, and the people who had paid it without hesitation. She spoke of the future. Galaxy no longer ruled by fear, a universe where beings of every kind could choose their own destinies. And she spoke of humanity, not as conquerors or rulers, but as examples. Proof that the smallest spark could become a fire that consumed empires. Torik was gone, but his people's research lived on. Across former Dominion space, new nations were rising, species reclaiming identities that had been stolen centuries ago. The Ilmari were remembered not as a dead race, but as heroes who had shown the way. Tai-Ho did not speak. He stood before Yuna's name and remembered her smile, remembered her courage, remembered the last thing she had said to him. We did it. Tell them we did it, he had told them. He would keep telling them. For the rest of his life, he would make sure that no one forgot what she had given. Above the memorial, the stars were shining. Not as symbols of tyranny anymore, but as promises. 1 billion worlds waiting to be explored. 1 trillion stories waiting to be written. Humanity had redrawn the map of the galaxy, and their journey was only beginning.